Hello, my name is Cason. I am a student at the University of Tennessee with the Baker School of Public Affairs and Public Policy. Communicating in the government and communication in the government is vital to our democracy. Therefore, getting an insight in not only how does the government communicate internally, but also externally to the people is just as important. Therefore, I'm glad to share today. I'm going to have a conversation to help us gain a little bit of that insight with my friend and the mayor of Knox County, Glenn Jacobs.
Well, thanks, Cason. Everything you said is exactly right. Communication is vitally important. I would argue not only within business, government, but even within our interpersonal relationships. I think the ability to communicate and articulate ideas is one of the things that separates people who achieve their goals from people who don't.
Well, to get into the question side of this interview, I just kind of want to talk about not just your responsibilities, but Knox County as a whole. What makes Knox County and Knox County government so special and just stand out to you?
Well, for me, we just have great people. We have a great team. It was driven home to me a while back when I was we're just reading some news stories from other places, and just sadly the corruption in some other areas of the country. And it's like, golly, those are things that we would never ever see here because we hold ourselves, and the public holds us to, I think, a different standard, a much higher standard. But the people that work for Knox County government, by and large, they're there because they want to serve my constituents, the people of Knox County, and they do an excellent job of that.
Well, kind of pivoting a little bit to more of your personal responsibilities. What does a day for the Knox County mayor? What does that look like? What are your responsibilities, your duties?
Every day is a little different. For instance, today I was actually at the Baker School. They hosted a luncheon with the U.S. ambassador from Australia, which is really neat to hear especially his insights on China and their influence on global markets. And they might think, well, why would a local official be there? Well, the thing is, one of our major priorities, one of our major tasks is economic development, and understanding, at least to some degree, how global markets, we think about global markets kind of in the theoretical and textbook, how they're really working right now, okay? Especially when we think about things like nuclear energy, which here in East Tennessee, we hope to have a much bigger footprint on, which includes things like just the personnel, but also the material needed. So when you think about China and the fact that they're basically trying to corner many natural resources, rare earth minerals, and so forth, that actually has an impact on us. So day to day, everything is different. A lot of days it's going around and going to public functions, speaking to groups, and those sort of things. Also, my job, I have two primary functions. One is we put together the budget, present that to commission. Within that budget, obviously, is the priorities for that year and going forward. And the other one is the day-to-day operations of the county. I have more of a CEO role than some of the mayors of the smaller counties because Knox County is so big. So a lot of the day-to-day operations are actually carried out by our senior directors and their departments. But my job is to make sure that all those things are going well and going smoothly. Then you move towards the budget, which also incorporates a lot of planning and just looking at the future areas that we need to concentrate on, things that we need to do.
What makes someone successful in government?
I really think many of the same things that make you successful in any endeavor, they translate. And we call them soft skills, which I don't like that term because it sounds like they're not important, but they are vitally important. One of those is the ability to communicate, articulate your ideas, how you treat people, how you take input from folks. Obviously I have the final say on a lot of things that happen here in Knox County and the policies that we make. However, I receive a lot of input from the people around me and sometimes from the public in how when we're formulating those final decisions. Yeah. But I think one of the most important things is just how you treat people. Especially when it comes to the folks that I don't like the term employees, subordinates, or anything like that. I just like the team and how I treat my team members, because often, I'm the person making the decisions, but they're the person that actually has to carry things out and has a much better feel of how things might be out there than I would.
Yeah. And I guess going a little bit further, not just government when we're talking politics, when we're talking running elections, getting elected, doing more of that public facing.
Right.
What makes, just going a little bit further, what makes someone specific in that?
Oh, I mean, again, it is your ability to articulate ideas, your ability to take information, being able to get through that, formulate your opinions on things, and I always say that when it comes to elections, there's really, people vote on two things. They vote on policy, but then they also vote on the candidate, whether they like them or not. So it's that likability, but that also has a lot to do with transparency, with communication and how you communicate. You see a lot of folks that are somewhat condescending. That doesn't cut it. To me, it's all about servant leadership, and really it's in the election process that you do get to show that you're listening and that you believe the job is about serving, not about being served.
So now kind of getting specifically talking, we've talked already a ton about it, communication. What kind of communication skills not only does Knox County Mayor need, but just any mayor across the country? What do they need?
Really, one of the most important things is the ability to take sometimes fairly complex ideas and put them in a way that everyone can understand. I think that people are a lot smarter than they might think that they are, but a lot of times experts and politicians talk over people's heads and specifically so they don't understand them. At times I've been guilty as far as, I'll use technical jargon and my team's like, don't say that because that's real jargony. You need to speak in a way that everybody understands you, which means you have to talk like people talk. And most of these ideas actually aren't that hard. It's, obviously I'm going to spend more time on them than the average person does, so I do have an advantage in that area. But my job is to take them and really be able to package them and say, this is why we're doing this, and this is why this is important, in a way that everybody's going to understand.
Now, kind of getting into more of the inner workings of your position, how do you communicate with your team? What strategies do you use? How do you go about your day in a way that your team knows exactly what your vision is and exactly how to execute that vision?
I mean, it's just being as transparent and clear as possible. Obviously, I don't really like a whole lot of meetings because I don't like meetings for the sake of meetings, but obviously you have to have everybody on the same page. And when we do have meetings, you try to make them as effective and efficient and seriously as quick as possible. But the main thing is just a constant line of communication. My team knows they can pretty much call me anytime, night or day, and we can talk about things, that they're going to get an answer about what I think on stuff. And then too, a lot of it is once you're around folks long enough, they somewhat intuitively know, there are things that just happen. They're like, the mayor ain't going to go for that, or he's going to love this. And that comes from having a rapport and experience with each other.
Yeah, and you've already touched on it a little bit, but I kind of want to see, whenever your team is kind of giving you a little bit of feedback, giving you some constructive criticism, or, just kind of picking your brain on something, how do you go about taking that, and how do you go about adapting that into, your leadership style and your communication style?
I always have to remind myself, that first of all, no one is above constructive criticism, obviously. And I always have to remind myself that in many cases, they're the subject matter experts. And I'm taking ideas from them. And then when it comes to communication, look, I mean, my degree's in English, so I'm pretty used to having my papers edited and those sort of things. And you just have to take that and realize that everyone's trying to make things better, and it's not personal. And I think that's where a lot of folks in leadership positions mess up is you can't question me, I'm the boss, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't work. It's a team and you might be the head coach, but you need input from everybody to be successful. And frankly, you have to have competent people around you. And if you don't have that, if you don't trust their input, that becomes a real problem and you're not doing your job as the coach, as the leader.
Yeah. Obviously, in times where something that goes out is a little unpopular or kind of the idea of crisis communication, I kind of want to see how have you used these two things we've just talked about, you giving out communication and taking it back in. How have you worked with your team, if you have a specific example or an anecdote of how you've used that to handle an issue or something that's kind of a strenuous experience?
Well, first of all, you limit those experiences by your communication up front. And so things happen, okay? I mean, they just do. Stuff always happens out of left field, and you're like, well, certainly that wasn't on my bingo card for today. So, those things do happen, but you can certainly limit the unexpected from, and often what happens is a smaller issue from becoming a full-blown crisis just by talking about it, just by being transparent, just by getting out in front of it. But you have to be honest. That's the most important thing. And sometimes that's not going to be popular because you can't. People want to hear a certain thing, and you can't always say that. However, because that's not the truth, right? But if you're honest, what happens eventually is, people may not necessarily like what you're saying, but they respect the person saying it, so they accept it. Whereas you get into situations, again, like we see in other parts of the country, where you have elected officials who may not always do that, or the federal government, frankly, has a horrible reputation. And, people just automatically think, well, frankly, they're lying to me. Right? That's the worst possible situation you can be in. So sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and you just have to say, this is the way it is. I'm being as honest as I can possibly be. You may not like it, but this is how it is.
So we've talked obviously a lot about your team, communicating with that team, that internal communication. Now I kind of want to see, what is your approach to when it's time to communicate to the public, whether it's a video or a live speech, any time that you're talking to the good people of Knox County?
Right. When you're obviously internal communications, just like a company or any other organization, you get down in the weeds on things. When you're communicating with the public, in which case that's our consumer, it's you hit your points again, as open and transparent as possible. Give them the information, but also do it in a way that is palatable. And I do a weekly update once a week. We try to keep it less than 4 minutes, and the reason is because no one. Nowadays, people are not going to sit through a 20-minute video. That's just not the way it is. So, you want to be concise. You want to pack as much information as you can, but also put it in a form that obviously the consumer can readily digest. Also, I think it's important to just have as much communication as possible. I'm very active on social media as well as any other platform that I can find, and the reason for that is just because you want to have that ongoing communication as much as possible.
So we've talked so much about that communication skill, those soft skills. Do you think people are just born with that skill, or is that something that everybody has to train and prepare and build to be an effective communicator?
I think like so many other of our inherent talents and gifts, some people do have a better propensity for that particular skill, but it's nothing you can't learn. I mean, I actually studied quite a bit communication, leadership, which go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, some folks just are naturally better at it than others, but it's something that everybody can do. And there's lots of books and research that tell you how to become a better communicator.
Do you have any suggestions? What kind of books or
resources? I actually watch a lot of Ronald Reagan's speeches and anecdotes because he had the ability to do exactly what I was talking about, as far as taking subjects which a lot of folks would consider somewhat complex and putting them in everyday terms that everybody can understand, and also doing so in often a humorous way. Even when I criticize my political opponents, I use humor. I use satire more than anything, and the reason for that is because it makes a point without being so mean as we often see. Folks sometimes do. But one of the most, it's all Dale Carnegie. I mean, that's one of the most important things. Even with your face-to-face communication, I remember in the book, How to Influence People and Win Friends, and basically was talking about how he had gone to a big party and was with some socialites, and one of the people there started talking to him, and Carnegie never said anything. They talked to him for like half an hour, and then afterward they were telling people that he was the best conversationalist they'd ever heard. And I've heard the same thing, for instance, with Senator Lamar Alexander. And I remember someone was telling me the story that there was he was at a function, and an older lady, who wasn't like she wasn't like a big important person or anything like that. She was just a person, but they saw Senator Alexander leaning over to listen to her, and for a couple minutes, that lady had the ear of a United States Senator. So that was, and he was one of those people that listened. It wasn't just a show. So in many cases, the talking part is maybe not as important as the listening part when it comes to communication.
So obviously we talked earlier about your CEO role in the county government. So when you're putting together your team, what specific things stand out when it comes to communication? What are those specific pinpoints that you see that you're like, ooh, man, that's somebody I want working for me on my team?
Well, obviously it's going to depend on the position. But basically it's someone that I don't worry so much about technical expertise. Some areas you have to have that. I want good people. Frankly, the same way when I've been in the private sector. You can teach people how to do a lot of things, but you can't teach them how to show up to work on time. You can't teach them to be conscientious. You can't teach them, in many cases, to work hard. And that's frankly not my job. So I look for people that already have kind of those soft skills, and the other stuff we can work through, or we can, a lot of times too. And again, the private sector is the same way. You find someone and they're really talented, but you might not quite have a great position for them. But you want to keep them on your team in some capacity until something opens up. So for me, it's not so much that someone might have these technical skills. Obviously, some areas we have to have that because that is the job. But rather, they have the other things as far as the ability to communicate, humility, how they treat people. I can't say enough about that, especially the folks that are in supervisory roles. I mean, part of the reason I think that we're successful in Knox County is my chiefs of staff, the senior directors. You can see how they interact with the folks who work for them, and there's mutual respect. And you get so much more when people respect you, when they like you. You're going to get a lot more out of them than if they're intimidated by you and they're just scared of you.
Kind of continuing on that path, just kind of thinking advice that you would give to someone who is pursuing any career they see in the government, whether that be something more managerial or elected, like you, or if that is that technical role, what kind of advice would you give to someone looking to enter into the field of government?
Yeah, for me, again, it would be working on those soft skills in your personal relationships. Also, your leadership skills. Read John Maxwell. He's basically the guru of leadership. He's the person that I read a lot.
Yeah.
Jim Collins, Good to Great, Built to Last. You know, a lot of these books that are about business are actually also applicable to government. Because it's the same things that make you successful in that realm that can make you successful, not only government, actually in anything else that you do.
So what would kind of be your advice, giving it a college flair or a young professional flair, to someone who is looking to get into government? What should they be doing right now in their early 20s? You know, what would you emphasize?
The most important thing is the mindset, right? Remember, the world doesn't owe you anything. A lot of people, especially nowadays, we have this entitlement mentality of, oh, you know, I should get this because who I am. No, the world doesn't owe you anything. If you want to get ahead, you have to figure out how you can basically serve other people. Zig Ziglar, who was the sales guru, used to say that you can have anything you want as long as you help enough other people get what they want. Yeah. And it's the same in my role. I'm a servant, okay? Yeah, might be the mayor, but ultimately my job is to serve the people of Knox County. My job is to ensure that the people serving the people of Knox County have the tools and have the ability that they can do their job. I don't look at it as, you know, I never have with anything I've done, what I can get out of this. It's what can I offer, and then that's all going to come back to you. That's just the way the world works.
Yeah. Well, I do want to thank you for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I feel like it really has been very insightful, not just to the communication aspect of government in total, but specifically with Knox County. You know, while not a Knox County native myself, it's my second home. So getting to know it a little bit more and getting to know the structures around it has just been fascinating. So I thank you again very much, and I thank everybody watching, and until next time.
Thank you.